Welcome back, everybody. All right, I've been playing Throne of Liberty for about 150 hours now. I want to say about 120 to 130 of it has been very active play, where about 30 of it has been AFK or just kind of semi-active play. And I kind of wanted to give you guys a follow-up review and talk to you guys about what I think about it at the end game, now that I'm at the end game. And I've been on that grind for a week or so. Kind of give you guys an updated review, so to speak, for those of you guys that are still thinking about maybe playing a game, or maybe even if you're already playing the game and you just kind of want to reaffirm your thoughts and opinions and maybe add your own. Obviously, the comments are there. I always read them. I think I evidenced that in pretty much every video. So if you are watching this, do me a favor, hit the like button. If you want to comment at the end, I'd be more than happy to see that and read that. All right, so without further ado, we're going to get right into it. In the last video, we talked about things like the visuals, the combat systems, the PvE and group content. And in this video, we'll kind of do a little bit of an update on some of those. But I want to mostly focus on one of the things that I feel like the game needs and is lacking, and the things that I feel like the game definitely does really well and should lean into in terms of its strengths. And we'll go from there. All right, first off, one of the things that drives me absolutely insane about this game, and I'm going to kind of just show you guys while I do it, is a middle mouse button, for whatever reason in this game, when it's not even bound to anything, drops you out of the sky like a rock. And it has driven me absolutely crazy and has gotten me killed on more than one occasion, and we're about to show you guys that right now. So I use middle mouse to talk on Discord, right? And so when we talk about this, like, I'll be here, blah, 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 talking on Discord, and then, wah, and splat. I just go curse splat onto the ground, and it always drives me crazy. So that's something that's really frustrating about it. That kind of brings to light the next issue that I kind of have with the game, which is there are unbound keys that still have binds, and it should not work that way. I'll give you an example. If you unbind tab from anything, tab still has a hidden function in the game. And it just shouldn't work that way. If you unbind the keys or you rebind the keys, there shouldn't be hidden functions in the game that continue to use those key binds. So just something that I've noticed. I think some of you guys might have noticed it. I don't think it's just tab. I think it's other buttons like shift is another one that has hidden keys. And it's also kind of frustrating when you go into your shortcuts, right? We'll go to our shortcuts right now. Where is it? Settings. All right, and then we'll go to our shortcuts. And you can bind shift to things, right? But you can't bind shift keys to things. And I really like using like shift 1, shift 2. Like those are, in my opinion, good keys to use. And in this game, doesn't really support that. You can, however, bind alt and control keys to things, which has been my kind of like go around. So I'll like alt 1, alt 2, control 1, control 2. This is kind of a free bonus for you guys that are looking for that keyboard space. I highly recommend using your F1 through F4 keys. Always bind F1 to F4 for things you don't necessarily need immediately. Like if it's a self buff or it's a group buff, it's a really good slot for an F1 or F2 slot. In Black Desert Online, I used to use my F1 buff for my E buff, and I used to use F2 for BSR absorb. In this game, I use it for things like Da Vinci's Resolve and Stigma as a sword or as a dagger greatsword wielder. So something to keep in mind. Okay, so that is just an observation. I would love it if you'd be able to bind shift plus number or shift plus letter keys. That is something they could definitely add and would kind of be nice, and just get rid of those hidden hotkeys. The other thing that I really kind of that I noticed that was a little frustrating was that, okay, we have our block, and I like the way the blocks work in this game, but I'm just going to attack this mega lobster over here I guess that's not going to work. Let's go somewhere where I can attack a proper mob, and I'll just kind of discuss what I'm talking about while we do it. Let's go over to the Shadow Crypt. What you just saw right there where I clicked on it and then nothing popped up happened because I use actually a foot pedal for my push to talk, and this goes back into the hidden key binding. So my my foot pedal has a unique key bind, but because that key is being pressed, when I go to interact with that menu item, it never pops up. And that happens in a lot of things. Like in this game, I have to release anything that's a push to talk or a key bind in order to press in order to activate a pop-up menu, which happens a lot, like especially when you're doing like instance queuing or something. All right, so let's get back on topic though. We have like this mob right here. I want to fight this mob. And when the mob goes to do a special attack on me, I'm going to want to use my Q block, right? And perfect, I do my Q block, no problem. But here's where it becomes an issue, is if I want to dodge, I feel like Q block and dodge should be on separate binds, right? I feel like there should have, or at least the option, maybe not by default, but at least have the option to have them on separate binds. Like if I want to Q block something, that uses stamina, and I am activating an ability that I can then counteract the enemy that I'm fighting with, right? Whereas if I am dodging something, right, the dodge mechanic works very differently. It doesn't activate anything. So I feel like it'd be nice if I had the option to double tap for my dodge instead of just single tapping, or rather instead of just pressing Q in a direction. I feel like that's kind of a bit of a flaw in the system, I guess. So I'm just trying to activate it here. So like if I want to dodge, I have to press Q and a button, Q and a button. But if I hold Q and stand still, right, it activates my defense, which will then, let me trigger my counter abilities. Can't block yet because of stamina defense, of course. But that's the only major flaw I really feel in that. Other than that, overall the system is good. Don't get me wrong. I'm not like strictly complaining here. I do think the system is good. I just wish that it was a little more customizable. The game does a really good job of customizing different, settings to make the game feel different, especially if you're like more of an action player or you're more of a more of a tab target player. It does do a really good job of giving you those options to kind of toy with those as you please. And I like that. And it's not just that, but it happens like with things like AoE abilities. You have like the ability to I'll just go into the settings and kind of show you myself some of my settings, because I feel like these are almost, I don't know why they're not on by default, but maybe because I play action mode and I have different expectations than somebody who does not play action mode. Perhaps that might be it. But like there are settings within the game that allow you to make the game, it makes the game feel different. Like, for example, we have, where is it, target, I think. The way you target an enemy, search by order of priority, search by distance, search by astral vision. These are good settings. These will fundamentally change the way you access enemies in the game. And then coming over to controls, right? Let's go over the controls here. These options are really good. Toggle charge skills. If you pay attention to what these are actually asking, it says like when it's on while holding the skill button, it charges while you hold the skill button and release when you let go of the skill button, versus when it's off, where it's like charges are activated right when you press the button and the skill is used when the button is pressed again, right? That might be like, oh, well, I definitely want charge skills on versus off. However, if you couple that with Q skills and you couple that with, what's the other one? I think it's, what is it, like some kind of like AoE skills? I think it's aim skills. Yeah, if you couple these two together, this allows you to execute charge attacks without having to rapidly smash the buttons or without having to hold the button down. You just press the button, you press the ability, it charges the attack and then automatically executes the attack. So that's something I always found that was really nice, and it took me a little while to find that setting, but it's not obvious that these interact with each other, and that is kind of a detail that might be lost on somebody that's playing this game for the first time. So I'll just like pop this Grey Wolf here real quick and show you what I mean by a charge skill. So I'm gonna press my charge attack here, which is 4. I just pressed it once and he executes the attack. And for AoE attacks, it's very similar, where if I go into my PvE build, see if I have to wait for those abilities to come off cooldown. But when I go into my PvE build, I have AoE abilities that were really frustrating to activate, because I'd have to like press the button and then press it again to trigger the ability, or at worst, I'd have to hold the button down. But by changing my settings, I made it so that I could just press those buttons. So for example, Will Breaker, boom, I just press the button. I don't have to confirm the area. I just press the button and he executes it, much like you'd expect in an action game. Or if you look at like Ice Tornado or Tornado, if you're any greatsword user, you can just press Ice Tornado once and then it activates without having to confirm the area of effect. So those options are really nice, and I just would like to see them to have that option available for separating a Q block from a double tap, because I never want to accidentally roll, when I'm trying to block an incoming attack. I want to just block when I want to block, and I want to roll when I mean to roll. And I think the best way to handle that would be just to have those binds separated. In this game, another thing that I feel like is a really big positive verticality in this game is handled so much better than other MMOs. Like I'll use Final Fantasy XIV, for example. In Final Fantasy XIV, when I run around Ul'dah, my brain is just like, I can't understand where to go. The map is stacked in such an obnoxious way, and then if you have an NPC that you're trying to interact with, it's really hard to tell what floor that NPC might be sitting on. So verticality in this game is handled really well, where I feel like it's really obvious as you switch levels, the map automatically switches. It's not like stacked with other what's called emblems all over the map that are hard to read. I feel like they handle verticality enormously well. At no point have I been like confused as to where an NPC or a interactable is, because I can kind of see it on the map. And when I'm looking for an area to do a quest in, and there's usually an up arrow on the map indicating that it's on a level above me, and I really like that about the game. When you have any game that has complex environments, I think another game that really fell victim to that wasn't just Final Fantasy XIV, it was Guild Wars 2. Guild Wars 2, Heart of Thorns, was really, really guilty of bad verticality. And I feel like they learned that lesson, because in the next expansion, that verticality was pretty much gone. They didn't have such abysmal verticality. So that is another factor, right? One thing that I do miss a lot between BDO and this game specifically is I miss the ability to autopath. Now, autopathing BDO, I think it's like kind of unique to BDO in that sense, where in games like this, you can target somebody and just like follow them. But in Black Desert Online, you have the autopath. I can be like, okay, over my map, I can set like a waypoint over here, and my character will automatically maneuver from wherever I am over to that waypoint that I selected. Now, in this game, it's not so hardly missed. Like I'm not breaking my back over this one, because I have the ability to teleport, and the teleportation is really nice and very easily accessed. So I feel like it's kind of a trade-off. Like, okay, I don't have the ability to autopath, but I can just kind of teleport to wherever I want. And so it's not awful, but I still do miss it. I like, when I want to go turn a quest in or something, I miss being able to like right-click that quest location. This game, it'll kind of move the map over to that quest location. I'll just kind of show you what I'm talking about here. If you click on, like target this, it'll show me where it goes. And if it's somewhere nearby, if it's not something that's like specifically interactable, it actually just slides you over to that location. And those are always really nice. The minimap, if it's close by, it'll slide you over the minimap, and you can just click a waypoint over there and teleport. So it does handle it fairly well, but it's just something I noticed that I did miss. Another thing about this game that drives me a little bit crazy is the mobile UI, right? And when I say mobile UI, let me go ahead and move myself out of the way here. So when you look at our interface over here, you get these little red dots to kind of along the top to indicate, hey, this is where you need to be going. This is where you need to be looking at, or there's something here for you, right? And like if I go down to my guild, for example, I can go to my rewards and I collect my rewards. That's helpful for me as a player, but this is very mobile game-like. I feel like a lot of mobile games do this pretty frequently. And it is like a very touch screen, touch a screen, touch this button, get your little dopamine hit, whatever. And in this game, it doesn't really translate super well to the PC, because now what ends up happening is we have a bunch of interfaces that I feel like could have been better managed, but because it was kind of built for a mobile interface, it was not super well managed. It's like, obviously it's doable, but it's just obnoxious. There's one here in the battle pass that I cannot figure out how to make it go away no matter what I do. So whatever I do, it's always there. This one kind of drives me crazy. Like I don't know what to click on. I don't know where it's trying to guide me. I go to Zenith Shop. I have no idea. By the way, if you know what the best thing for me to buy in the Zenith Shop is, please tell me in the comments, because I don't, like, I look at the stuff, I'm like, this Zenith currency seems kind of rare. And maybe I don't want to just blow it on some random stuff. So if you know, like if somebody's min-maxed what the best Zenith Shop item is, please let me know. Clue me in, because me and my guild, we've been trying to figure that one out. All right. So that's pretty much my piece on the mobile interface. I feel like that could use a little work and needs a little bit of love. All right. There are things that I like in this game a lot. One of the things being the 3v3 arena is super fun. They have 2 ranked modes, which I think is brilliant, right? You go into there, you have individual and you have 3v3 match, and this is great. So if you're playing as an individual, right, you could be like, oh, you know, I just want to queue in and do an arena by myself. You'll still be in a 3v3 arena, very similar to how AOS works in World of Warcraft, or not World of Warcraft, in Black Desert Online. You'll still be in a 3v3 arena, but it puts you in a elo match makes you with people in your bracket and within the enemy bracket, and then now everyone's solo queuing. You're not going to queue up against the 3 stack, right? But if you have your 3 stack can queue against another 3 stack. Like, this should have been how AOS worked all along, because sometimes people just want to play with their friends, and sometimes people just want to play alone. And the people that want to play alone, or there's some people that just want to do both. You want to do both based on the availability of the homies, right? So this is where it's like, I feel they did really well here. This was really smart on their part, and I feel like if this was available in AOS would have been an even more popular game mode than it was with Black Desert Online. Right. So there's that. There is one thing that I do have a gripe about the arena, which is that fall damage in the arena requires you, like, especially on maps that require you to scale walls, is really frustrating. So you have one map in the arena where you have to, like, use your grappling hook to get over the initial wall. But if you just let yourself drop after that wall, you take fall damage. So it forces you to morph into the map, which is not necessarily the form you want to be in when you start PvPing. So I feel like there should be a bit of a fall damage negation for the first, 10 seconds or whatever when you run out of the spawn point. Maybe 10 seconds is too long. Maybe the first 5 seconds, so that you're not taking fall damage coming out of that arena, because no one wants to start a fight like this injured, right? You don't want to start a fight at 75% HP. You want to start a fight at 100% HP. So it is an observation, and it's avoidable, whatever, but I feel like it's just, it's an arbitrary interaction to create a morph right there, and I feel like, honestly, it's a little lazy. So from the developer's portion, because you're just now offsetting that effort onto the player and creating an arbitrary interaction that is unfavorable to the combat conditions of being on that map. So we talked about visuals as well. This game still remains stunning. I'm in a very foggy area, but look at this. It's just beautiful, man. Like, you look in the distance, and the sense of scale of the world is incredible. Let's go to a nice brightly lit area, and I'll kind of show you what I'm talking about. Where are we at here? We'll go to, let's go to the Windhill Shores. There's no pop-in, and that's something I really, really didn't realize how much I missed in MMO. The lack of pop-in. Like, this area has a very nice lighting, and we'll run into the fields here in a second. But no pop-in is huge. I've become so acclimated to pop-in in Black Desert Online that not seeing pop-in in this game and in Final Fantasy XIV was a really big breath of fresh air. And to put it into perspective, it's like, I'm gonna say something that some of you guys aren't gonna like. You can always see your nose. Right? You can always see your nose. Your nose is always visible to your eyes at all times. But your eyes just tune it out. And I feel like that's how I felt about pop-in with Pearl Abyss's game, Black Desert Online, is that I was just tuning out the pop-in, and no matter what settings I set my game to, the pop-in was always there. So it was always something that was a little bit frustrating for me to see that pop in. But as you can see, we run around the world here. We run around at a moderate speed. Part of Black Desert's problem is that the game world moves too fast. And I feel like the game can't really keep up with the speed of which players move in. And that's not just in, like, mount speeds or whatever, but that's also in things like, your abilities. I can honestly remember that when Black Desert Online first came out, I was using a regular hard drive. And when I got a tier 8 mount, I had to switch over to a solid state. And now I use an M2. And all of that is because of how poorly Black Desert Online used to handle mount speed. So here we go. We have a nice area right here. Look at this. Look, this environment is gorgeous. So the more I play this game, the more I appreciate the environment. Now, this game does what World of Warcraft does and what Black Desert Online does, which is it has a persisting open world. And that is so great. I love the persisting open world. And for me, if you have an MMO that doesn't contain a persisting open world, it makes it very hard for me to feel like your game is a world and not a series of interconnected bowls. And Terra, Final Fantasy XIV, and Guild Wars 2 are exactly what I'm talking about. Those games are a series of interconnected bowls that use warp points as a way to get, you can't really get from one area to another without moving through a warp point. And then it's very immersion breaking, I guess. It stops feeling like an open world. Whereas this game and Black Desert Online and World of Warcraft and I think WildStar 2 used to do that as well, where they were very much an open world. You see a mountain in the distance, you can just go to that mountain. You know, you want to see, you climb to the top of that mountain and you see a lake, and you can just go to that lake. And it's really cool. And not just that, but in games like this one and the ones that I mentioned, you can life skill at those lakes. Like you can go and pull out your fishing rod and pull up a fish, you know. And in this game, I think they handle life skills very differently than Black Desert Online. Black Desert Online is very passive life skilling, whereas in this game, it's very much the opposite. It's very active life skilling in this game. So active life skilling is different. It's not my cup of tea. I like the AFK life skill personally, but I know a lot of people that love their life skills. And I think that the ability to have that active life skill is amazing. I mean, it's honestly super fun. I didn't hate the fishing. When I did the fishing in this game, I really didn't hate it. I thought that it felt somewhere between MMO fishing and like Final Fantasy 15, which I think handled fishing the best in any RPG that I played, outside of like a Bass Pro Simulator, which I've never played, right? Fishing is handled remarkably well. Life skills are handled very well. They have cooking, which reminds me a bit of the Breath of the Wild system. I think that's kind of what they were going for too. They were going for like a Zelda-esque feel on the cooking. So I felt like that was handled really nicely. And you need, in those fishing and cooking, they kind of feed into each other in terms of life skills, which kind of brings me to my next point. But before I get too far away from the game world, I did want to say that one thing I really liked as well about the game world is that we have our map, right? Our map has our finite spaces, but the game actually encourages you to explore beyond these finite spaces. And what I mean is, if you go to these areas, you can actually get interactable books, and you can find things in the world, that go towards your log, so to speak. And it's still really good. Like it helps it still increases your codex. It still progresses your collectible book stuff. And I think that's great. When you exit an area, like when you exit the boundaries of the map, the game does give you a little bit of warning and says, hey, you're about to exit the bounds of these maps. Just heads up, you're not gonna be able to respawn here. I think that's cool, because in other games like Black Desert Online or World of Warcraft, specifically World of Warcraft, you'll just encounter an invisible wall. In Black Desert Online, not only will you encounter an invisible wall, but if you somehow cheese and get over that invisible wall, you'll die. Like the game will just kill you. I don't recall that being the case in World of Warcraft. I remember a very specific instance in World of Warcraft where we broke Red Ridge and we ran around an area. Now, this is back before flying mounts were in Azeroth. We ran around an area that looked super odd. It was super fun for our guild to go out and explore it, but it was obviously not intended for the developers, for a player to ever reach that spot, because of the way that the mountainsides and there was just random holes in the world that were cut out. It looked like somebody cut them out with those like cross-cut scissors. It was really weird looking, but it was fun from an exploratory perspective of a player just kind of exploring this world and getting into an area that was unintended. And this game, in some sense, kind of encourages that. And it just doesn't encourage it with unfinished areas. It has finished areas that it's prepping for, and it lets players access them without waypoint stones. So like if you die, you're on your own. And I think that's very fair. And the encouraged exploration is a huge plus. So one of the other things I want to talk about is character animations. Character animations in this game, super smooth, and I love this. This is a small touch that really helps increase the feel of the game, right? When you do an animation, your character doesn't just jerk to the animation. Like I'm going to use even my own VTube model, right? My VTube model kind of jerks to animations when I use them, because that's how the model is designed, right? This is just how VTube Studio is. Well, I'm going to jerk to the animation, right? But when it comes to these MMO games, there's a lot of some MMOs do that, where they just kind of jerk to the animation, and some of them don't. They really fluidly flow into those animations. And I'll just show you a couple of them that I'm talking about here, and you can get an idea of what we mean. So we'll go to our emotes, right? We go like agree, right? These are nicely done animations, and I feel like this is kind of a staple of Korean games. They do pay attention to a lot of these small things, and I always love that about these games. But yeah, this is a huge plus, a huge boon. I do kind of wish they would do what Final Fantasy XIV did. And Final Fantasy XIV, what I mean is if you've never played Final Fantasy XIV, what they do in that game is if you have a pose, like let's say you just stand, right? You could just stand in a position, and the game has like 5 different positions you can just stand in. You type in C pose, which stands for change pose, and your idle stance just changes. And that works for like sitting too. Like when you just sit, it works in the sitting animation where your idle pose while you're sitting just changes. And that also affects, even when your weapon is out in that game, you can pull your weapon out and your idle pose again just changes. So in this game, there really is only one weapon out pose. It's a small detail, but I feel like it does help with the immersion of the game. So I think it'd be nice if they added something like that in the future. One thing I did see that they were talking about adding was like when we have our morphs where you morph into creatures to get around. One thing that they're kind of experimenting with right now is instead of having a morph, you ride your morph. So instead of having like a wolf or whatever this thing is, you'd have your character riding that thing. Or maybe when instead of a bird transport, you'll have your character hanging on to that bird. I think that's great. I think it's super cool that they're even discussing that. It does show that the game is willing to progress and change and try things that the players are responding to, because I think the morph system for some players, not for me, because I think it's cool, for some players is a little bit of a distractor. One of the things I love about this game is just moving and mounting. Like, I went and loaded up Black Desert Online, and I went to go summon my horse, and I had to like stand still. And while Black Desert Online still feels like a modern game in a lot of respects, in that respect, it still has some of the old MMO tropes of like stand still and get your mount. That is a really weird thing that happened in old MMOs, like Final Fantasy XIV does it, World of Warcraft does it. Lots of older MMOs, you have to stand still, you summon your mount, and even in like World of Warcraft, the mount comes out of nowhere. So what the hell am I doing? Like your character just stands still and does this weird thing where he like shuffles his hands around like he's shuffling a deck of cards, and then poof, your mount appears. So I feel like that is something that this game does really nicely, where it's just a super smooth transition. I felt like Final Fantasy XIV was like, they were almost there. They're like so close to there, because while you still have that mount summon, you can activate a short-term sprint, and that short-term sprint has a really long cooldown. And I feel like if they mix those two systems, where instead of just having a sprint, you can either summon your mount, or maybe you can sprint faster, and not have such a long cooldown on it, like it would honestly be better. I still don't know why you can't mount in cities. I still don't know why, you can't. Well, I guess you can fly in every area in that game, but just to kind of like not being able to mount in cities is kind of obnoxious, especially when the run speed is so slow and you can't do it infinitely in a city. I don't know why sprint is not an infinite activation in cities in Final Fantasy XIV. Like, I feel like if I press the sprint button, why am I fighting a cooldown when I'm just running around the safe zone of a city? But that's a completely separate topic. So one of the other things I really like about this game is the varying gameplay loops. Varying gameplay loops in this game really feed into each other, and they feed into each other in a smooth way. So let's say I want to, do contracts because I want more abyssal coins. I'll travel over to the Phonos Basin and I'll go pick up some contracts, right? So now I'm doing what is basically like quote unquote daily quests. Well, I actually went to the wrong spot. Let's go to the Watcher's Outpost, right? This is a way that the game smoothly feeds into the endgame dungeons. So you go to the endgame dungeons, and so that you are not just living there forever, so that people have to exit the spot and other people can come in, and it creates a system where people aren't just able to just indefinitely stay in these spots. You have these contracts. So you'll do these contracts, on a semi-regular basis because you want more abyssal coins. The contracts award you with abyssal coins, and abyssal coins let you go grind those endgame dungeons. So I'll pick up some. I'm looking for some skeleton ones. So I like doing the skeletons more, but you know, if you pick up one, like I'll pick up this zombies one, I can then refresh the whole page and then pick up some new, and get some new ones out. So here are more desperate zombies, skeletal archers, you know, whatever. I'll just pick up these zombies. I guess I'll do zombies then. Today's a zombie day. That's what we're doing. We're doing zombies, boyish. So just using this as an example, this feeds into into the circumstances where now I'm using these contracts to then go do them. I'm going to get rewarded with abyssal tokens. Abyssal tokens will let me go grind the open world dungeons. And for some people, if they think that's like a limiting factor, they just want to grind those end world dungeons nonstop. For me, I love that. I think that's a really, really smart way to make it so that people aren't just camping the highest end spots indefinitely, that there is things to do in the world. The world constantly feels alive, and it creates a varying gameplay loop where I'm not just doing the same thing over and over again. I kind of have to vary my gameplay a little bit, and I think that's really smart. I love that about this game. And then, yeah, that's kind of it. The other thing too that I really like is that guild activities in this game, when you do a guild activity, it kind of alerts your whole guild. So everyone's on board. Everyone's like, oh, hey, you know, I see, you know, 5 guild members are doing this guild contract or whatever the case may be. And I think that's super cool. That I don't know why more games don't do that. And I feel like even in Black Desert Online, they do it in the most opposite way. You know, they if a player is killed, it announces to your guild that you died. So like it almost rats you out. Like it tells the game like tells your guild, hey, so-and-so died. Like, I'll give you an example. In my guild, years ago, one of my guildmates, when they were leveling up, died to tiny bees, and we we memed on her for years for dying to tiny bees. You know, it's still funny, you know, oh, you died to tiny bees, and then like I want to say a year later, this is like a whole other circumstance, but a year later, they died to a Mancham hut. And that's all it said is it died to a Mancham hut. And we're like, how did you die to a house? And granted, the Mancham hut, you know, spawned mobs that killed her, but it just happened to be the same person that died of the tiny bees. So didn't really help them very much. It kind of made it worse. But this game does the opposite of thing, where instead of announcing the negatives, it announces the positives. You know, it's not going to tell you when your guildmate died, but it will tell you when your guildmates, you know, are doing an activity together, and you know how many guildmates are doing an activity together. And that's a super cool thing, because if you're in a very active guild, you want that notification, because then it might encourage you to go play with them. And if you're not in such an active guild, if you're in a kind of a lower or small scale guild, you can at least go and, you know, play with people that you know are doing an activity. Like, oh, hey, so-and-so is online. They're active. I didn't know they were off work today. And then you just go hang out with them, even though they're not on voice. And encourages you guys to do activities together. And it's just a net win. And I think that's a great system, and it's very smart. So yeah, that being a factor is huge. But yeah, that's pretty much, you know, the about the game, you know, that in itself. Other topics that I kind of wanted to talk about was how PvP is handled in this game. I love this system. I really do. I think they kind of learn from the mistakes of other MMOs, where other MMOs are like, haven't really figured out how to get people to fight out in the open world. And this game did a really smart thing. Having events be open world PvP, you're like, hey, you know what? I want to go fight a player. Let's go to a PvP event. Versus, you know, I just want to do the boss and I don't want to be bothered by players. So you just go do the PvE version of that boss. If you're not in a massive Zerg guild that's like just swarming players down, you know, that there's also that awareness advantage. You know, like I don't want to go to these world bosses that have players fighting at them because I just want to do the world boss. I'm in a tiny guild, versus like, oh, I'm in this very big competitive guild. Like if you're playing on Chernobog, you might be in a very competitive environment where there's lots of guilds running around in massive numbers. And if you're in a small guild, you're kind of just SOL, right? For those world bosses. But you're not SOL from the game, because there's peaceful versions of those bosses that you can just go to, and you don't have to, you know, go to the PvP enabled versions of those bosses. So I think that's a really smart system, and I'm glad that they implemented that. But it's not just that. They have like dynamic events. I found I've heard some people not really liking Dominion events. I found the Dominion events to be super fun. You know, randomized team, you're not necessarily just playing with your guildmate, you're playing with members of the community, and you could be against your guildmates, and there's just a lot of fun to be had in those Dominion events And because they're a little more team balanced, instead of playing with just the people you know how to play with, you're playing with everybody. So kind of a huge factor as well. Let's see here. It's not just that, but the nighttime dungeons. I love the nighttime dungeons. Jesus, the limited respawns, nature of them, getting locked out if you die, like that's so cool. It adds some stakes, like it adds some feeling of like, oh, I have to win, because if I don't win, then I'm kicked out of the dungeon until it reopens. Like, it's a small thing, but that small thing is really exciting. It makes the game feel exciting, and I love that about the game. And I wish more games did that. And I feel like, I know this is going to sound kind of weird, but if BDO just captured some of these systems and put it in their game, they would instantly have a better game. Literally, just the nighttime dungeons is a great example. If you go to an endgame grind spot, and at night, in BDO you have like 4 hours of day cycle and 40 minutes of night cycle. If at night those areas became hostile, and I'm not just talking about our shop, I'm talking about everywhere. If those just became hostile areas and maybe limited you to a party of 5, that would be an actual blast. That would make the game fun, feel alive. There'd be a purpose to PvPing. There'd be a purpose to getting gear, so you can help your other players, or help your other teammates get stronger, and then fight players more effectively. There'd be a purpose to those things, but they just don't do that. And I feel like they could really benefit from that game. This is actually one game that I'm very happy is doing so well, is succeeding as well as it is, because I hope that like Prolibus can kind of learn a lesson from this game and take some of the good systems and synthesize it into their own game. I don't feel like enough MMOs do that. One of the reasons that World of Warcraft stayed on top as long as it did was because that's exactly what World of Warcraft did. They would take things that other games are doing and they would just do it themselves, and they wouldn't necessarily do it better. They would just do it themselves, and it was more or less the same system, just done even honestly kind of worse than the original game did it. But because it was happening in World of Warcraft, a World of Warcraft player didn't need to leave World of Warcraft to go experience that gameplay or that content. And that's something that Black Desert Online could really learn from. If they want to be successful in the long term, I feel like that's something that they could really learn from that, and maybe like reducing the overt and heavy Korean propaganda that's inserted into the game, and do something like translations that make some of the NPCs and items and interactables comprehensible to people that don't live on the Asian continent. Because for a lot of us, it is very difficult for us to pronounce some of these names. And I know I'm not the only person who's been like, what the heck's a gookbap? I still don't know what a gookbap is. Some kind of food? I don't know. But the lack of relatability for me does not spark joy. It makes me feel alienated as a Western player, and they really could have just, I don't care if they made it a hot dog. They could have, that was a super easy thing, like, go get your hot dog from the inn and eat your hot dog. And I'm like, it would have felt less heavy on the propaganda, but now we have like the whole soul and what have you. So I don't know, that's just some thoughts. I feel like they could really synthesize the things in these games and just make them better games. And some games aren't afraid to do that. They're not afraid to copy each other, but some games are. They feel like, oh, if it's not original, then we can't do it. And those games don't tend to do so well. If you look at the biggest games, they all copy from each other. Shoot, I think World of Warcraft's latest entries in their story is almost a direct rip from Final Fantasy story, because Final Fantasy does the best story making in the genre. Like they are. Final Fantasy 14 has the best story making in the genre. And if you play MMOs for story, then that game is going to give you something that no other game will do. While Black Desert Online is getting better at making stories, and they're getting better at telling their stories, and they're beginning a new player experience, it's really late in the life cycle for Black Desert Online to be a developing quote-unquote game. We can't really talk about Black Desert Online's potential anymore because we're beyond potential. The game's been out for 8 years in North America. We're not talking about this game's potential anymore. We're talking about where it is now. Anyway, this video isn't about Black Desert Online anyway, but I hope this helps out anyone that might be like on the fence and not sure. My overall like end take, just to kind of summarize, I feel very positively about this game. I do plan to continue playing this game because it's so much fun. And the only way that I would stop playing this game at this point is if Black Desert Online fixed their game. If they remove the cron stones and reverted the world PvP changes, I'd be back. But because they haven't done those things and they're not likely to do those things, I'm going to keep playing TNL because I can get my world PvP fix and have fun and not have to worry about, offending somebody and them getting all, ants in the pants because they died in PvP that they were definitely expecting. Arsha anybody? But that doesn't mean that you still don't get players that get a little salty about dying in the world. And that's the nature of PvP games. People are going to get salty. So if you're that guy watching the video and somebody kills you out in the open world and you're like, oh man, I'm just trying to do my quest. You're picking on me. You're bullying me. Like, just don't do it, man. Don't be that guy. Don't be that guy because without people looking to PvP, your game will more or less just be a dead game. And that's not fun for you. And it's not fun for anybody involved. So just something to keep in mind. All right, that's all I've got for you guys. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sitting through all the way through, as always. We will be back on our next adventure very soon. So I hope to see you guys on my next adventure. Make sure you do hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. All right, God bless, guys. I'll see you around.